How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the PatriotDIY channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build a basic workbench just like this one right here. Alright guys, now we built a couple different types of workbenches here on the channel. We built a miter station and a table saw outfeed table, but a lot of us just need a basic workbench. So I have made digital plans for how to build a basic workbench, and I'll have those linked in the description below for you guys. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to build that workbench, but with a little bit of a twist. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you might remember we built this flip top planer and jointer cart. Now, in that video, I mentioned that I built this just a little bit shorter than normal, and I left one side of the flip top empty with the intention of being able to roll this up under a workbench to keep it out of the way until I need to use it. This is a great space-saving technique, especially for those of us in small shops or limited space. So when building this basic workbench, I left off the bottom shelf and I made it the perfect height so that my flip top planer and jointer cart can roll right up underneath it and stow out of the way when I'm not using it. If you haven't seen the video on the flip top planer and jointer cart, I will put a link to that right here at the top of the screen. Now I'm going to get in here and I'm going to show you exactly how we built this basic workbench. But first, guys, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Now let's get to work. First, we're going to go over to the miter saw station and cut all our pieces down to length. Having a stop block on your miter station makes these repeatable cuts much easier. Once we've got those components cut, we're going to start assembling the legs. Now our legs are going to be made of a doubled up 2x4, and each of our front legs is going to need a 3-inch offset on one end. And you'll see the reason for that here in just a minute. So I'm going to lay out my pieces and apply a liberal amount of wood glue, and then put the two pieces together, leaving that 3-inch offset on one end, and clamp everything together. Now you could definitely just leave these clamped up and wait for that glue to dry, but for this application I'm just going to go ahead and countersink and screw these two pieces together and then remove the clamps. And I'm just going to repeat that process for both of my front legs. Now when you're assembling legs like this, it can be a good idea to cut that longer piece just a little bit too long. That way you can go down and trim it to final size later. The assembly of our back legs is going to be pretty much the same, but for this design, each of our back legs is going to have that 3-inch offset on both ends. Once that glue's dried, I'm going to take each of our leg assemblies over to the jointer and create a flat face on one side of each leg. Now our final dimension for each of these components is going to be 3 inches wide, so we can take all of our parts over to the table saw and start to trim off those rounded factory edges until we have our final width of 3 inches wide for each piece. And I'm going to be doing the same thing with each of those leg pieces and run our jointed side along the fence, cutting off the excess on the other side. If you don't have a jointer, you could definitely just trim off both sides using just the table saw. And like I mentioned before, I had cut each of my leg pieces just a little bit longer than necessary, so I'm going to go back and trim them to their final length. Now the top and bottom of our workbench has some cross supports that are going to be attached with pocket hole screws. So I'm going to take each of those pieces over to the Craig 720 Pro and drill pocket holes into each end. And with all the components prepped, I'm ready to start assembly. So I'm going to lay out my sides and the cross supports on the workbench, spacing these supports out evenly, and then clamp everything in place and fasten it together with pocket hole screws. Now I'm ready to start installing those legs, but first I'm going to give them a good sanding with some 120 grit sandpaper. Now we're effectively building this upside down, so we have the top of the bench down, and as I start to put those front legs into place, you can see how that 3-inch offset comes into play. And each leg fits perfectly into the corner and gives me a place to screw it in from the inside. Now for my application, I'm constructing my back legs a little bit differently. There's going to be a horizontal support spanning the length between the two back legs. So I'm going to go ahead and fit all those components and fasten them together with wood screws before attaching it to the rest of the frame. Once that's done, I can bring it over and attach it to the top of the workbench the same way we did our front legs. Then on each side, I'm going to attach a support between the front and back leg assemblies. So with the workbench still upside down, I'm going to clamp that into place and fasten it with pocket hole screws. And I repeat that for both sides. You can see now the way I've constructed this, it leaves the front of the workbench completely open so I can roll my cart underneath it. Now I'm ready to start working on the bench top. Now this is going to be made up of 2 layers of 3/4 plywood, and I'm just going to be ripping those down to size using the table saw and the track saw. Now I'm cutting my bottom layer to the exact size, but I'm cutting the top layer a little bit wider so that I can go back and trim it down later. Now I'm going to go back and drill some pocket holes on the inside of our frame. This is going to be how we're going to attach the top later. Now I'm going to be constructing my top upside down. So when I'm putting this in place here, I'm putting my good side down. Then I'm going to apply a liberal amount of wood glue to the surface and use a piece of scrap wood to spread it evenly throughout the top. And then I'm going to set my bottom layer in place and clamp it all together. Once I have my 2 layers securely clamped, I'm going to countersink and fasten these 2 layers together with a whole bunch of 1¼ wood screws. Once that's done, I can remove the clamps and flip my top over. Now you'll remember I cut my top surface just a little bit wider than necessary, so I'm going to go back and use a flush trim bit in my router to trim that top piece to the exact size of the bottom layer. Once I've done that all the way around, I can go ahead and center the top and fasten it to the frame with pocket hole screws. Now to cover up the end grain of that plywood and to protect the edges of the workbench, I'm going to add some 1x2 poplar trim around the edges. So after cutting those to size, I apply some wood glue and fasten them in place using brad nails. Now you'll notice I start with the sides here, and I left my front and back trim a little long so I can trim it down to size later. Once I've got that front piece on, I'm going to go back and trim it using a flush cut saw. Now this step is optional, but I did use a 1/4 inch round over bit to soften those top edges. With that, the top is complete. So give everything a good sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper and get ready to apply our finish. Now you can use any finish you want for your bench top, but for mine I'm going to be using shellac. Now I apply a thin, even coat with a foam brush. Now let that dry for about an hour and then sand the surface with 220 grit sandpaper before applying another coat. Ultimately what you'd like to have is 3 or 4 coats. And the last thing we're going to do here is go ahead and add our adjustable leveling feet. And because I like everything in my shop to be mobile, I'm also going to add these fold down casters. And that is it, guys. Our basic workbench is complete and I think it looks great. All right, guys, that is it for our basic workbench. Now, the great thing about building a workbench like this is you can build it in a lot of different sizes and configurations. For example, I had a pretty specific need because I needed to be able to roll my planer and jointer cart underneath it. But I did make my plans with a little more of a generic design with a bottom shelf. It's going to be more functional for most people, but the plans can be easily altered to accommodate whatever your need might be. But either way, the result is going to be a very nice looking, very sturdy, functional workbench. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you've been needing to build a basic workbench in your shop, I hope this video helped you out. Don't forget, guys, as always, we'll have links to all the tools we use in this video linked in the description below, as well as those digital plans. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.